D&D is one of the best tabletop role-playing games out there, and definitely my favorite. With all the freedom you have in this open-world adventure, the possibilities are nearly limitless for what your characters can do. But sometimes, as a DM, what you've planned for the session falls a little flat, and the social interaction, exploration, and combat don't meet your standards. So let's take a journey to look at other games, and how they handle these elements, and try to learn from them for our future sessions. This is definitely not just an excuse for me to play video games on Twitch. It's time to level up.
Hey, you're finally awake.
Skyrim is the latest role-playing game set in the Elder Scrolls universe. It boasts an epic, high fantasy experience with many possibilities, over 200 quests and storylines to follow, all while you, the player, forge your own adventure in this world of dragons and Daedra. I myself have played it for over 300 hours when I first got my hands on it, and many people in the RPG community often praise it for its sense of freedom, player agency, and decision-making. Many who play Dungeons & Dragons often look to Skyrim as inspiration for what an open-world experience should be like, but I would argue otherwise. Skyrim can teach a DM how to create an amazing environment, realistic characters, and intricate storylines, to be sure. But it does not teach us how best to make an open-world setting. At least, not in the same way that players and DMs would both enjoy at the table. Hi, I'm Ian from Incendium D&D, and today I'm going to be looking at the lessons of Skyrim and what we can learn from it to level up our skills as a dungeon master. Just so you know, there are spoilers for the game up ahead, and everything I'm about to say has to do with my own personal experience and opinion. Before we get started in this video, instead of asking you to subscribe, we're actually going to roll for it. I'm going to roll a persuasion check, and you guys get to roll an intelligence check against it. These are my white gold dice. I only use them for serious business. 11. For everyone who rolled below an 11, welcome to the channel.
Watch your tongue. You're speaking to Ulfric Stormcloak, the true High King.
Ulfric? The Jarl of Windhelm? You're the leader of the rebellion.
When you begin the game, you find yourself waking up at the end of a long journey to Helgen, a village on the border between the province of Skyrim and Cyrodiil. Your hands are bound, but you are free to speak to the other prisoners riding in the cart with you. One is the Stormcloak Ralof, one is the Jarl of Windhelm, Ulfric Stormcloak, and the other is a horse thief named Lokir. This is very intentional. The Elder Scrolls series has a long history of starting the player as a prisoner, and when you gain your freedom, either through escaping a dungeon, a dragon attack, or being pardoned by the Emperor, you as the player literally become free to explore the world on your own terms. This is a great way to empower the player, making them feel like there's nothing holding them back from forging their own path in the world. When the dragon attacks and Helgen is sent into a panic, you find yourself trying to escape in the chaos. The game emphasizes your player agency by letting you choose which faction, the Stormcloaks or the Imperials, to assist you during your escape. This choice, at least on your first playthrough, will probably have a strong influence on how you experience the central political conflict in Skyrim, the death of High King Torygg at the hands of Ulfric Stormcloak. The consequences of these events permeate Skyrim's main storyline and help to create a compelling world. But maybe you're not into that, and you're more interested in classic dungeon delving, wandering the wastes, and discovering caves and landmarks. One of my favorite things is to find unmarked locations, places that don't have specific names but are full of lore regardless. For example, maybe you're on your way to complete a quest and something catches your eye through the brush. There's a camp with a body lying over a stump covered in blood. Killed by a bandit? Maybe. But looking around you, you find there's other possibilities. The Rift is known for being heavily populated by bears, as you heard from Temba Widearm over in Iverstead, and Honeystrand Cave is close by. A bear attack could have easily taken his life. Places like this can really encourage you to put on your thinking cap and put the pieces together on your own terms. Whether you choose to follow the path of the main story and see it to its conclusion is up to you. No matter where you go, however, there will always be interesting scenes and characters to greet you, all with lives of their own thanks to Skyrim's AI. And Skyrim's NPCs, especially for the time, can be quite interesting. Before Skyrim came The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, where Todd Howard, then executive producer for Bethesda, helped create one of the most ambitious projects in the Elder Scrolls series. NPCs had started operating on what was dubbed Radiant AI, which Bethesda described as changing the in-game characters from mere sources of information to people with their own lives and habits. Of course, their dialogue was far from perfect, and often resulted in awkward or clumsy interactions with each other.
Oh, hello.
Why, you dirty little thief!
Have you heard any word about the other provinces?
Nothing I'd like to talk about.
Good day.
Take care.
What treachery! The traitor still lives. It is Matthew Bellamont. Do not let him harm the Night Mother. Kill him!
But this unique behavior followed the series into Skyrim, where we get even more lifelike NPCs who go about their daily tasks, interact with each other and the player character, and make the world feel as if you truly live there. If they're a quest giver, they feel as though they have individual personalities that motivate them for giving you the quest in the first place, even if those motivations aren't immediately obvious. A fan favorite is the follower Serana, a central character in the Dawnguard DLC whose dialogue tree is famously complex. It unlocks over time as you journey together, and is affected by your own questions and comments. But I have a less prominent NPC who I feel is a great example of the depth of Skyrim's characters. Mjol, the Lioness of Riften.
You and I are alike. We seek challenge and great fortune. But for me, that's where the similarities end. You see, Riften is my great beast to be slain, and my fortune comes from gratitude and trust.
Although not everyone's preferred follower, even I don't enjoy her company that much, her character is interesting to observe. She's a heroic sort, kind-hearted and always interested in doing the right thing. She'll even forego pay if it means helping others with their troubles. Mjol has been adventuring across Tamriel since she was a young woman. She would hunt with her father, making long journeys to regions like Morrowind to stalk the cliff racers there. With her mother, she'd take a cart to Solitude to gaze at the magnificent Imperial galleons at the docks, enjoying the peaceful city life. Things changed one day, however, when bandits raided her village, and so she became an adventurer, exploring ruins and fighting highwaymen. Although she had always planned to be a warrior, this was the turning point in her life. Hearing her talk about the trauma of losing her family fleshes out her character, but still makes it seem as though there are things that she hasn't told you. Internal monologue is a hallmark of three-dimensional characters, and Mjol the Lioness gives that impression strongly. The depth of her character goes further when you hear her talking to Aaron of Riften.
I had another run-in with the Thieves Guild.
Be careful, Mjol. The Thieves Guild has Maven Blackbriar at her back. One snap of her fingers and you could end up in Riften jail. Or worse.
They represent the reason I'm here. I can't just ignore them, Eren.
I know. I just don't want you to leave. You're the only good thing that's happened to this city in a long time.
This hold has been corrupted by the Thieves Guild and the Blackbriar family, and she'd love nothing more than to save the town from crime. By placing this pure-hearted NPC in the most corrupted hold of all Skyrim, the developers have created tension that needs to be resolved. If you're so inclined, perhaps you'd be willing to help her with this endeavor. Unfortunately, Bethesda chose to focus on other questlines, reserving Mjol to a mere potential follower. Of course, what they did with those quests is quite exciting. The main quest lines, those regarding the main stories, guilds, factions, and DLCs, are vast in Skyrim. The Thieves Guild, the Dawnguard, the College of Winterhold, not you, and the Dark Brotherhood are among the most interesting joinable factions in the game, each with their own story to tell. And the developers of Skyrim do know how to write a good story. Despite how much people tend to criticize the main story, it is a fantastic setup. An escaped prisoner makes their way to Whiterun to warn of the dragon attack at Helgen, only to find that another attack is underway at a nearby keep. As the only one with any sort of experience in this kind of thing, you are ordered to assist however you can, with whatever skills you've built your character to use thus far. This launches you into the main storyline of the game, dealing with resurrected dragons and a prophecy proclaiming you to be the Dragonborn. Following this route will lead you to exciting lore, world-building implications, and complex NPCs. But the main story isn't the only way to uncover this stuff. You can just as well take your Dragonborn powers and strike out in a completely different direction. One of my favorites to join, as is many people's, is the Dawn Guard, a long disbanded group of vampire hunters who are confronting the blood-sucking plague that's been spreading across all Tamriel. When the vigilance of Stendarr are demolished in an attack, it's up to you to figure out why, and how to stop the world from being completely subsumed by darkness. It's hard to talk about the Dawn Guard without mentioning Serana again. I don't want to waste too much time singing her praises, as many have already done so before me. Her dialogue is beautifully written, and evokes deep emotional undertones. She's witty, clever, and a valuable asset in combat. She and the other NPCs of the Dawn Guard really make this world come to life, allowing the player to get to see how their actions directly impact the world around them. Will you choose to save Tamriel from the vampiric scourge, or will you let yourself become corrupted by the power lurking in the shadows? So Skyrim sounds like a great game so far, an epic fantasy role-playing game with deep world building and excellent characters to interact with. Who can argue with that? Well, I'm not going to deny those things are true, but the fact is, Skyrim can kinda get a little stale after a while, at least if you play it the way a lot of people do when first experiencing the game. Let's start with the dialogue. Skyrim works on a dialogue tree system. When you converse with an NPC, you pick the option that best reflects what you want to know, or how you want to react. For example, when Temba Widearm asks you to take care of some bears, you might be able to ask her how those bears are affecting her business as a miller. She'll then reply with,
"These damn bears are driving me crazy." Have you ever seen what a bear does to the trees? They jump on their hind legs and scratch them to bits, marking their territory or something. It's getting to the point where I have to scour Skyrim for untouched trees at the right size. Costs me too much time and money.
This is a good amount of information to go off of, but after the quest is complete, there's just not much more you can talk to her about. And if you think this is just for background NPCs, we also have to consider that once you finish a major quest, the quest giver will run out of dialogue as well. This is normal for a video game, but because Skyrim is such an immersive world, this can throw things off and bring you out of that perspective pretty easily. Another thing to consider is that there's a low risk, low reward kind of gameplay that we frequently see in Elder Scrolls games. Because of the nature of quick saving, players can choose to explore all options without feeling like they have to commit to a choice they might not like the consequences of. Even for major decisions, you can make two separate saves and continue both routes independently. This is critical for replayability actually, and serves to strengthen the Elder Scrolls as a game, but it does change our expectations for role-playing as a whole. I've heard a few stories about players who come from Elder Scrolls backgrounds into Dungeons & Dragons, and sometimes they find it difficult to transition between the playstyles. In D&D, your actions have consequences. Dungeon Masters strive to create scenarios of high-risk, high-reward gameplay, where you lock in your decisions and play out the results. Sometimes there's a glimpse behind the curtain, where the player might ask what if about an event, and the DM might be inclined to answer. But that's pretty much to the extent of it, and the excitement you get from imagining what else could have happened is, in my opinion, a lot more exciting than quick saving to experience everything all in one character. Now, to address the mammoth in the room, the default experience of many Skyrim players, becoming the murder hobo. The Dragonborn is a powerful main character. This is good for players who want to feel important in the world they're enjoying. But what happens when immersion breaks and they realize they are so powerful that nothing else matters except them? Well, that's when you get the murder hobo, a character who wanders the game world, unattached to any community, indiscriminately killing and looting. This can actually be pretty hilarious to witness. You level up your character as high as possible, get the best loot, and become virtually invincible. So much so that when you start committing crimes and murdering people, even the infinite amount of guards that spawn from the dungeon won't be enough to stop you. To put it in the words of Kirito,
"You may think you got me all figured out, but there's one thing you didn't account for. My numbers are bigger than yours. Funny thing, really. Get to a high enough level and you're basically untouchable."
freedom in an open world RPG is a blessing and a curse. On the bright side, it means that you aren't shackled to a single story. And on the dark side, you have no limitations, and can wipe out nearly every NPC, quest giver, or monster in your path, leaving only the essentials in your wake. We want to play open worlds because of the infinite possibilities for our characters and our experiences. But when we break in-world laws, we are outright destroying those possibilities, all for the cheap thrill of saying you could go full purge if you wanted to. Lastly, we have the illusion of choice. Skyrim does a great job of maintaining this illusion in the beginning. You go to your first major quest line, and assuming you don't murder hobo your way through it, you can get fairly satisfying conclusions. But even with the Radiant quests afterwards, there's nothing much that you can do that would make you want to stick around for too long. It just becomes another source of gold generation. So naturally you start looking elsewhere. And wouldn't you know it, in the next holdover there's an awesome looking guild with a neat questline and some excellent loot. The only problem is, the purpose of your previous quest actively conflicts with this one. How can you reconcile being both a pickpocket of the Thieves Guild and being a member of the Dark Brotherhood, for example? In the Thieves Guild, you are forbidden from killing anyone when you join. It is literally impossible for you to avoid betraying the agreement that you made with Brynjolf if you want to see what it's like to murder people for a living. And sure, the Dark Brotherhood is all about secrecy, so maybe you won't get caught. But have you seen the Dark Brotherhood lately? They're elite assassins of Tamriel next to the Morag Tong, and they can't even eliminate a high-profile target without alerting everyone at the wedding. I mean, come on, Vizara, I've got this assassination handled. Why did you come here? And at the end of it all, what does your character get for sacrificing their morals, their oaths, to have the full Skyrim experience? Well, you become the leader of the faction, get more Radiant quests, and get a handful of followers. That's it. And once you become the guild leader, there's no further follow-through on what comes next. D&D offers the space to continue that journey, and it's unrealistic to expect to be the Archmage, Companions Leader, and Head of the Thieves Guild all as one character. So how do we fix this? Well, actually, there is one great example that Skyrim gives us which avoids this pitfall. The questline when you get caught between the Forsworn and the Silverbloods of Markarth, called the Forsworn Conspiracy. Entering the city for the first time, you immediately notice that crime is rampant here. A citizen gets murdered right before your eyes, a symptom of the tension between the native Reachmen and the Silverblood family. If you look further, you start gaining the attention of both factions, and easily end up in the city's de facto prison, Sidna Mine. There, you learn more about the Forsworn's cause, their leader, Madanak.
I'm not Monadnak!
And what part you might have to play in it. I don't want to spoil too much, as it's really a thrilling experience, but here's the gist of it. If you assist the Forsworn undoing the work of the Silverbloods, you can help them take another step closer to reclaiming their native homeland. This is a sympathetic cause, and it's easy to buy into. However, at the end, you don't become the leader of the Forsworn, nor do you even hold good standing with their people who have been displaced across Skyrim. No, you get some excellent loot and some intriguing lore from Madanak before departing.
Now, I announce to all of Markarth that I have returned. Don't worry about your name. They'll know who to blame and fear after today. It'll take years, but I'll organize the Forsworn again. We'll reclaim our land, and then when power is ours, we'll have peace. A kingdom. Until then, let me offer you a warning. Beware the Forsworn. No place in the Reach is safe from us now.
This is how Bethesda should have approached more quests. Becoming the faction leader is great and all, but what the player is really looking for is to know how they played a huge part in developing the lore of Elder Scrolls. It also leaves an open-ended question that you can more easily speculate about. What will happen in the next game with the Forsworn? How will their story end? Will they succeed in their goals? Instead of giving us a flat, "you are the guildmaster now" answer, the game inspires us to imagine more to the world. This is what creates real immersion. On a side note, when these guys left Markarth after their killing spree, I followed them to see where they'd go. They took a strange route, which may have been due to pathing glitches, but finally they came to this rendezvous point. It was pretty neat because no one was hostile to me or anything, and it was cool to see where they go after the main quest there. Getting back on track though, this is a video game, and video games aren't limitless in their design. It has to end somewhere. But when so many people look at Skyrim and think, this is how I want to run my D&D world, that's the experience I want my players to have, well, we have to think about going deeper than the surface of the game. We need to think critically. So, what can we do? Skyrim has believable factions, fleshed out towns and holds, and an extensive world history to support it. But you don't need all those things to create immersion, not immediately. Instead, start with the bones of your world. Think about at least 3 different forces in your world. Maybe start with an orderly force, a chaotic force, and a neutral force. This will set the background for the future factions you may want to introduce later, and instantly creates dynamic tension in your world that player characters can act upon and influence in their adventures. Bethesda took years to develop the lore for their games, each installment expanding on the last. Like them, start with one piece at a time. Let the details grow slowly session after session. Experienced dungeon masters know that all you need to have a good time in a game is a town, a quest, and a motivating reward. But when your players start asking deeper questions like, why did we get this quest? Who stands to gain from completing it? And how come their adventures in the first place? That's when you can rely on the foundation that you've laid out before the game started. Even if you don't have an answer right away, you can always say, I'll get back to you on that. Or maybe the players will draw their own conclusions, making answers that you might like, even if it needs a little tweaking. The most important thing about this step is that you're letting your players discover your world for you. This is what creates immersion, and this is why Skyrim, especially as a first-time experience, makes people play for hundreds of hours. But let's be honest here, Skyrim's NPCs are really what flesh out this world for the character. You can sculpt your world into a masterpiece of environments, monsters, and dungeons, but if you don't populate it with interactive people, then you're just playing a survival simulator. Don't worry, we'll talk about that game in the future. Interesting non-player characters need to have motivations, needs, and morals, or lack thereof, and you don't want to go overboard when introducing them to your players. I found it really easy for DMs to fall into the trap of, this town needs to have 200 people, and I need to create backgrounds and or jobs for all of them to make my town feel believable. Problem is, the chances are your players are only ever going to interact with like 5 prominent NPCs from that settlement, so just use 1, maybe 2 NPCs in a quest. Let your players get to know them, and see how they react to the character you placed before them. If they really like them, or at least find them compelling, have them appear more often. Give them some character development. What are their goals? Why are they interested in the players? What surprises do they have in store? This approach can also be taken when you're looking for a major villain in your story. Introduce one bad guy, and if that doesn't take, introduce another. Don't force your players into conflict with someone they don't find realistic or interesting. Alternatively, you could use these potential villains as mid-bosses who work for the real big bad evil guy, whoever that ends up being. This can also help your players feel like they have time to defeat that villain, and they are one step closer to saving the world. The last lesson I'm taking from Skyrim is how to write intricate and compelling storylines. But that's not because of what Skyrim did, it's because of what it didn't do. Because of the nature of the game and how free the main character is to do whatever they want in the world, quests can often make players feel like their choices have no meaning. Every major faction ends with you becoming the guild leader, and even when there are loads of more experienced NPCs in the group. How you go about completing each quest makes no difference. It'll always end the same way. Dungeons & Dragons doesn't have to be like that. The consequences aren't limited to the game's programming or rule set. You, as the Dungeon Master, have the right to tell the story with your players however you see fit. You can introduce real risk and reward to the game because your players aren't all-powerful. They aren't prophesied to save the world through sheer luck of their birth. At least, not if you don't want them to. When the players overcome these challenges, they'll feel like they really accomplished something worth doing. The solutions to each problem will be unique because each player character would do something different given the same scenario. This is at the core of what makes D&D so special. The quests you come up with leave room for a player to express their agency. Even if it means turning the whole story on its head, they know they can do it because you gave them that opportunity. Thank you so much for watching this video. The Level Up series is a passion project of mine that I came up with a few years ago and never really got around to doing, nor had the editing skills to accomplish it. I want to thank my co-creator John for helping me finally bring it to life. What do you guys think about Skyrim? Is there anything else we can borrow from it to use in our D&D games? If you like this video, let YouTube know. Press like and leave a comment, and don't forget to ring the notification bell. It really means a lot to us. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Yes, no natural lighting this time. Oh, come on!